As we continue to work our way through the 7 different types of boundaries, today we're going to dig into what it means to set material boundaries in your life. Now, if you've missed out on any of the previous boundary episodes, you can go back and look for emotional, intellectual, physical, and sexual boundaries. Those have all been covered in the previous weeks. Today, we're going to talk about material. So when you think about a material boundary, we don't want to overcomplicate things. It's simply saying, if I have something, someone else doesn't automatically have access to that thing unless I choose to give them that access. And you get this right in your life. You get to decide who you do and don't share your stuff with. Sometimes this is tricky because when we have something awesome that other people like or want to borrow or want to use, it's hard sometimes to feel like we can say no. I'll give you an example. I have a carpet shampooer, and a couple of years ago, my neighbor asked if they could borrow it. Being the nice person that I am, I said, sure, why not? Go ahead. They borrowed it, they gave it back to me, and they said, oh, we ran out of the detergent that we were supposed to be using, so we just used some stuff we found at the dollar store, and we went ahead and used it multiple times on our house. Now, I wasn't thinking much about it. I was kind of like, okay, whatever, that's odd, but okay, I'm sure it's fine. When I went to go use it at my own house, I realized that not only had they damaged some of the elements of the shampooer, using that soap that wasn't meant to be used in the shampooer damaged it in some way, and I couldn't even get it to shampoo my carpet. So I ended up having to take that to the repair shop. It cost me a significant amount of money, and then a couple weeks later, they asked if they could borrow it again. Now, learning how to set material boundaries helped me understand that it was okay for me to say, you know what, I just really need to keep it at my house. I don't want to go through the process of having to repair it again. And I just let them know what happened. I wasn't mean about it. I wasn't, ugly about it. I just simply said, hey, this happened. It's not something I'm okay with. I'm not going to share that with you anymore. And that's a boundary that I set. And not only is it okay to set that, they respected the boundary. If for some reason they had not respected that boundary, that would have been a reaction based more on them than me, because I didn't do anything to really upset them. I just said no to something that I wasn't okay with. So I want you to start thinking about, how do you set material boundaries in your life? Do you find that you're one of those people that when someone asks you for something, it's hard for you to say no? And so I want you to remember that it is okay to say no if you don't want to say yes to something. Now, when we look at how this might show up from a relationship perspective, one of the things I want you to keep in mind is that it's a little tougher, right? Especially because when we blend our life with someone else, we do sort of feel like our stuff is their stuff and their stuff is our stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, but it is still okay for you to have boundaries around things. Let me give you an example of something that happened in a client session. One of my clients really felt it to be majorly necessary to squeeze the toothpaste tube in a certain way. The other partner didn't really care. They kind of mashed it and squeezed it and just, did whatever with it. This caused a lot of friction, and you might be hearing that and going like, wow, that sounds crazy. Why did that cause so much friction? And it's simply because they were treating this one material thing very differently. So the easy solution for them was to say, maybe you each need to have your own tube. And they even went to the process of labeling with a Sharpie marker which one was which. Now, that might seem petty, that might seem silly, but sometimes the solutions to setting a material boundary can be that simple, where you say, okay, rather than fighting over this thing, rather than being so at odds with each other about how we treat this one material thing, let's come up with a system so that we don't have to fight about it. Because neither person were wrong in their approach, but it was causing a lot of friction. So as you're thinking about setting material boundaries in your life, both from just a personal perspective in your personal life and people that you know, family, distant relatives, whatever it may be, as well as how you set them in your relationship. I want you to give yourself permission to say no to things that don't serve your greater good or that really don't feel in alignment with you and how you want to operate. Setting boundaries in this way is a form of self-care, and you always have to come back to the point of remembering that when someone gets upset with you for setting a boundary, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have set the boundary, and it also doesn't mean that you should have said yes to something that you don't want to say yes to. You get to determine how you share your stuff with other people and what access you give them to your things. It is okay to set boundaries, and we're going to keep talking about this because learning how to set these healthy boundaries is not only a form of self-care, but it's a way for you to love yourself and to love the other people in your life really well without resentment and without feeling like you're just obligated to do things. We are going to touch on money boundaries next time. And although money and material boundaries often get lumped together, money is sort of a separate thing that we have to address. So we're going to come back next week and talk about that. But in the meantime, I want you to be thinking about how to set these material boundaries in your life. And I will be back next week with more.